Hello everyone, my name is Madison Redmond, and today I'm going to talk to you about 7 elements of graphic design. Now, if you don't know what that is exactly, this presentation will definitely help you. It gives the definitions, examples, and what technically each element is. So let's get started with our first element, which is space. Now, there's 3 different types of spaces. There's 3D, positive and negative, and white space. So let's start off with 3D space. 3D space is the width or the reality of width, height, and depth. So if you've ever seen a cube, that's a good representation of 3D space. Positive and negative space is a little different. It basically, if you take a white piece of paper and then you draw a black bear on it, like you see in this picture right here, that is a good representation of positive and negative, because even though you're taking a part of a different of the page, you're still left with positive and negative. So whatever you draw is usually going to be the positive, while the outside is the negative space. Our last part of space is white space. White space is the space around objects that are of any drawing, but the one I'm going to talk to you about is mostly the dots corner in the corner. So as you can see, they're very orderly, they're very even, and very spaced out. That gives a sense of logic and order, while if it's too close together, it feels crowded. When being too far apart, it feels disconnected and doesn't really make sense, and it doesn't really draw the audience in my opinion. So it's kind of like that. So our next element is line. Now, there are many types of lines, but what a line is basically is a mark on a surface that's by a moving point or 2 points connecting together. Like you can see under where it says line, that is a line, obviously. But there's also different other types of lines. They can come in straight and curved, big or small, close together, fall apart, or directional. So basically what that means is a bunch of squiggle lines or even thin lines like you see in the bottom left-hand corner, or weighted lines, which is a line's weight or how thick it is compared to another line. So if you have one thick line and one smaller line, that is a good representation of line weight and how it's unbalanced. Our next element is shapes. Now there's 4 different types of shapes. There's geometric shapes, modified shapes, bilateral shapes, and asymmetrical shapes. So basically a geometric shape are the 3 main shapes that we all know: circle, triangle, and rectangle. Those are the most common shapes that are geometric of any sort of shape. While there are other shapes like our modified shapes, which are shapes that have been changed, such as this rounded black rectangle that the corners have been smoothed out and rounded, or skewered or rotated in any certain way. Bilateral shapes is basically shapes that are the same on both sides. So like example, like a heart, or sometimes trees, and even humans. So in this bottom left-hand corner, on the left side of it, that is a good representation of bilateral shape, because it's even on both sides and it matches perfectly if you fold it over. While asymmetrical shapes are not equal on both sides. They're both not equal in any way. They don't match. You fold it over and it's not going to line up. So a good example of this is like in the same example of a tree. That is a good example of it. Or clouds, paint splatter, or just any day objects that you really don't know or really don't pay attention to every day. They give off a feeling of disorderly and chaoticness, while bilateral shapes give a sense of structure and order. Our next element is size and scale. There are 2 different types of scale. There's header copy and subhead copy. Now we all know the head copy. Whenever you were in school, or technically still in school, header copy is always made 14-point size, which is pretty big, but it's basically the focal point. A header copy is the focal point that helps the audience know what the designer is actually talking about. Because it's in bigger font, it draws your attention in and it brings you into knowing this is what we're talking about. While the subheader copy, which we've all known would be 12 points, is a bit smaller but still pretty big to elaborate more on the design or passage that the designer or writer or any sort of creator wants to establish. It's basically what's adding on to what the header is talking about by elaborating and giving a little more detail until you read or actually look at the design or passage. Our next element is color. Now, color, we all know, if you've ever taken an art class, we all know what the RYM wheel is. It's basically the wheel that contains the primary colors, secondary colors, and tertiary colors, which I will explain in a second, but like you can see on the left-hand side, the color is basically what we use every day. There's color all around us, there's color everywhere, and I mean everywhere. So primary colors are the three main colors that we use that you can't mix. You can't mix two other colors to make this color, but you can mix these three colors to make a different color. So the primary colors are the yellow, blue, and red. So if you ever know what a primary color is, those are the colors that can't be mixed to make that color. Those are the colors that have to be mixed with something else to make a different color. While the secondary colors are the colors that you combine two colors, like the classic red and blue make purple, or yellow and red make orange, or blue and yellow make green. The tertiary colors, those are the colors that remain between the secondary colors and the primary colors, which are like yellow-green, yellow-orange, red velvet, blue-green, and all those colors. While complementary and antagonist colors, complementary colors are two colors that are opposite of each other. So blue and orange are opposites, while analyzing colors are the three colors sitting right next to each other. So the yellows, orange and red orange, or yellow, green, green, and blue green. While colors are vibrant, tinting colors is basically adding the color wheel with white. Toning is causing it with a gray tint to it, and then shading is adding black to the colors, which makes it a darker shade. Our next element is texture. There are three different textures that we know and sort of understand, but here's a little elaboration on it. Actual texture is quality of a physical touch, such as fur of a cat, bark of a tree, hair from on a human. As you can see in the top hand corner, that is an actual texture, which is the log of a bark or the log of a tree. It has a rough but smooth texture. You can see the indentions, you can feel the indentions and all that. Amplified texture, like I was explaining the actual texture with my words, is an illusion created through drawing techniques after either by hand or computer, which in this left-hand corner in the bottom is a picture of rope. But in reality, someone drew a realistic picture of rope. So it looks real, but it's actually just a drawing, or it was generated on a computer. While tactical descriptions that are basically of what the object or material is. So when I say it's hard or smooth or silky or soft or rough or sticky or anything like that, those are tactical descriptions of what texture is. Now our last, and certainly not least, element is value. A value scale helps designers determine how light or dark something truly is. Like a 9 scale at the very bottom right here, as you can see, which is kind of the opposite because 9 is supposed to be the darkest and 1 is supposed to be the lightest, but you get the idea. Those basically tell you the shades of how dark to light is. It helps the designer see the different shades and the different objects can be, which are like highlights, midtones, and shadows. So the darker side is going to be the shadows, in the middle is going to be the midtones, and on the very end is going to be the highlights on the other end. Now contrast is pulling bright highlights and deep shadows and placing them together to get what is referred as contrast. So if you take the first two, the middle two, and the last two and put them next to each other, you can see the drastic contrast between each shade, because you're taking them off of different ends of the spectrum. which helps the designer see clearly the different shade value in each square. I was really glad that if you liked it, reply. I hope it was very informative to you. If you liked it, please reply. And that's all I have for you today. Thank you.